Welcome to the 2019 online rules presentation. My name is Charlie Winsky, Assistant Commissioner of the South Carolina High School League. I'm going to spend time going through the first part of the presentation with you, and then I'm going to turn it over to your sport commissioner to take care of the NFHS rules. The first part of this presentation will deal with South Carolina High School League rules and regulations that are pertinent information for you as a head coach. Some of the information we're going to go through is going to be old information for you, while some of it's going to be brand new information. The old information that we're going through are either requirements that you must follow as coaches or rules that we're seeing broken consistently in the last few years. Please share this information with any of your assistant coaches or anyone that assists with your program to make sure that your program stays in compliance with the league rules and regulations. Coaching requirements. All coaches every year must go through the NFHS courses, the concussion course, heat acclimatization course, sudden cardiac arrest course. New for the 2019-20 school year is protecting students from abuse course. All four of those courses can be found at nfhslearn.com. Every coach in your program, from volunteer to paid, must go through that course each year prior to coaching in a practice or contest. As a reminder, all coaches must be CPR and AED certified. This must be done every 2 years. Your certification for both CPR and AED is a 2-year certification. So please check with your athletic director or your certification cards to see if you're due for a new certification for this school year. Sportsmanship. League office, we continue to see issues with sportsmanship by players and by coaches. We want to take some time this year in our rules presentation to put some questions to you coaches to get you to think about some things as it pertains to your team and your behavior for sportsmanship. One of the first things we want you to think about is, how often do you discuss this with your team? Do you make sportsmanship a priority? Do you take time each day to go through with your athletes your expectations, how you want them to handle adverse situations? Or do you put it on the back burner and let it become a reaction when it happens? If you put it on the back burner and let it become a reaction when it happens, you know there's a high chance that the result is not going to be what you expect. Understand too, we're working with teenage athletes. No matter how much you go over something and how clearly you set your expectations, you're still going to run into a situation where a kid's going to make a poor decision. What we don't want is one kid's poor decision to lead into multiple kids' poor decisions and have multiple kids ejected from a contest due to one incident. We continue to see an increase in team displays of poor sportsmanship throughout the year. One kid making a mistake is one thing. Multiple kids making the same bad decision at the same time escalates the situation tremendously. Take time, discuss this with your team, set your expectations, let them know what will and will not be tolerated. Two other questions we want you to think about is, if your team doesn't win, and obviously everybody wants to be a winner, and everybody wants to win every time you step foot on the competition field or court. But if you're not to win, or if you are to win, how do you want people to remember your teams? When the game's over, during the season, when you leave the sporting event, years to come, how do you want people to remember your teams? Obviously, everybody wants them to remember their teams as playing hard, consistently playing hard, giving it their all the coach speak you can throw out. But what is it about their character you want people to remember? No matter how difficult the situation was, they held their heads high and handled it well? Or do you want people to remember that whenever something went wrong or whenever there was a chance, they showed poor displays of character and poor displays of sportsmanship? You set the tone. You're the leader. You lead them in drills. You lead them in team activities. You lead them through contests. You also lead them down the correct path of sportsmanship. Take time to speak to your team about sportsmanship daily. Make this part of what you do. Make this part of your culture and your expectations. And remember, sports, they don't build character, they reveal it. What character will you and or your players reveal when times get tough? What character will you reveal when things are going your way? It's all part of the educational-based athletics process. Teaching skills, winning, developing the athlete, developing the person. Sportsmanship falls under the latter, developing the person. This is something they can carry with them as they go through life. Make it a priority each day to set your expectations on sportsmanship. Okay, athlete ejections. If you have an athlete ejected, remember, they can remain in the bench area during the contest. This becomes a supervision issue. If you ever have an official or someone that tells you your athlete has been ejected, they must leave the facility, they must leave the venue, that is not correct. Athletes are allowed to stay in the bench area if they've been ejected. They cannot return to play, but they can stay in the bench area provided they do not become a hindrance in the remainder of the contest. Also remember, any athlete ejected from a contest becomes immediately ineligible. They will remain ineligible to compete until they've been cleared by the league office. And cleared means serving their suspension. Failure to do so will result in you playing an ineligible athlete. Some changes this year to length of suspensions. Football, swim, lacrosse, and cheer will remain at 1, as it has been for many years. Golf, volleyball, and wrestling, because they use play dates and not number of contests, will remain at 2. New this year is a 3-game suspension. This is the minimum. We've increased the number of games allowed in these sports. Therefore, we feel like the percentage needs to go up. The executive committee changed this past May. The sports of basketball, baseball, softball, tennis, and soccer. An ejected athlete will carry a minimum 3-game suspension during the regular season. These minimums, the 1, 2, and 3 games for the sports, are during the regular season. If you look down at the bottom, playoffs have been changed to where an ejection in the playoffs carries a minimum next game suspension. So your minimums of 1 game, 2 games, and 3 games in the respective sports are for the regular season. Should you get ejected in the playoffs, all sports fall under a minimum next game. Understand, these games are set at the minimum. If you are ejected and it is a severe ejection, you're not going to get the minimum. If your ejection is a minor ejection or a routine ejection, chances are it's going to be set at the minimum. I can tell you, coaches, to share with your athletes, disrespectfully addressing a game official is not going to get you the minimum. Disrespectfully addressing a game official is going to exceed the minimum. So if you're in the sport of basketball, baseball, softball, tennis, or soccer, and you disrespect a game official, you're going to get more than 3 games. In golf, volleyball, and wrestling, you're going to get more than 2 dates. In football, swim, lacrosse, and cheer, you're going to get more than 1, because those are the minimum. Reminder, the ejections are served at the level the ejection occurs. If you're ejected from a sub-varsity contest, you must sit the number of games you're suspended for at the sub-varsity level. And a second ejection in the same sport will equal a 2-week suspension. Remember, that can carry a huge punishment, especially if you've got a basketball team that over 2 weeks has got 7 games scheduled. You're going to miss 7 contests because that's the minimum, is 2 weeks for your second ejection in basketball. Okay, ejection of coaches. Unlike players, coaches, if you get ejected, you must leave the facility or the stadium immediately and you cannot return. A number of issues in the last few years where coaches have been ejected and they weren't quite sure they had to leave the facility or stadium. We want to make it clear, if you're ejected, you must leave the facility or stadium immediately and not return. No questions asked. Whether you agree with the ejection or you disagree with the ejection. If you're ejected, leave. The best thing you can do as a coach when you've been ejected is to stop arguing, stop questioning it, accept it, and move on. In many cases, the minimums for coach ejections and the fine and the suspension are increased once the coach becomes ejected. You can do yourself a huge favor by leaving at that point in time. Remember, as a coach, too, you cannot return to coach at any level until cleared by the league. If you're in a tournament, first game's on a Friday at 8 o'clock at night, and you get ejected, you don't get to go back out there Saturday and just start coaching because you haven't heard from the league office. If you haven't heard from us, that means you haven't been cleared. And we will not be communicating this with you. We'll be communicating with your AD or principal. So if they've not heard from us, then you're not cleared. And you assume that they haven't heard that you keep sitting out. Changes this year to coach ejections. Executive committee approved in April. The coach ejection will now carry a minimum 2-game suspension, and the fine will remain at $300. In the past, the minimum ejection for coaches has been 1-game suspension and $300 fine. The minimum game suspension for coaches is increased to 2, and the fine will remain at $300. Remember, that fine goes to the school. The school decides they want to make you pay them for it. That's between you and your administration at your school. Now, that being a 2-game suspension, this is going to be crucial for you because, remember, the suspensions of a coach must be served at the same level where the ejection occurs. If you're a varsity level head coach or assistant coach and you're ejected from a sub-varsity game, you're going to be fined $300 and you're going to be suspended from the next 2 sub-varsity games. What that means is you will not be able to coach in any contest until you have served a 2-game suspension at the sub-varsity level. For example, you're helping your assistant coach out on a Thursday night, or your JV coach out on a Thursday night. You get ejected from the Thursday night JV contest. Your varsity team plays on Friday. Your varsity team plays Saturday. Your varsity team plays Monday. You won't coach in any of those games. Your JV team plays again on Tuesday. That'll be your first game suspension at the JV level. You will have missed the Friday, the Saturday, and the Monday varsity games. You sit the JV game. Your JV plays again on Thursday. You sit again. And then your varsity team plays on Friday. Now you're eligible to coach because you've served your suspension at the level where it occurs. So you got a 2-game suspension at the level it occurred, but you were ineligible to coach in any other contest between there. So essentially, because you were ejected from a sub-varsity game, and because the way your schedule worked out, you actually missed 5 contests total. Be mindful of that moving forward. There's no reason why varsity coaches should be ever ejected from a sub-varsity game. There's no reason why you should be ejected from a varsity contest. But if you are going to get ejected, understand the consequences of that ejection. And remember, if you're ejected from the final game of the season, the penalty is a minimum $500 fine. Okay, some reminders on ejections. The athlete's actions can get them suspended for up to 365 days. Rules and regulations do not allow any suspension to exceed 365 days. Obviously, 365 days suspension are reserved for severe actions of athletes or coaches. Rules and regulations also call for an athlete that is suspended for 365 days will result in the program being put on immediate probation, which will take you out of the playoffs immediately. Any athlete that leaves the bench during an altercation, they're going to get ejected from the contest, and that's going to result in a suspension. If they leave the bench during the altercation and they become involved by putting their hands on someone, even if it's in a goodwill gesture to remove them from the activity on the floor. If they put their hands on someone from the other team, grab them around the waist, pull them back, shove, punch, they're going to be ejected for multiple games depending on the level of their involvement. As we spoke about in the previous slide, disrespectfully addressing a game official is going to result in beyond the minimum for suspension. Physical contact with a game official is going to be an ejection and up to 365 days, depending on the severity of that contact. I can tell you more often than not, that is going to err more towards a 365-day suspension. The best thing you can do as a coach for your student athletes is to video every contest start to finish. Wide angle camera lens so everything can be seen. Instruct your camera operators to keep the camera running during any altercation. The important part of that is, yes, the ones that are guilty are going to be viewed. We're going to know who's guilty. But the most important thing is those that are innocent are going to be able to be cleared. We want to clear the ones that were not involved. We want to clear the innocent. It also allows us to see the level to which the athlete or the coach was involved. Without video to review the severity of the actions, all we have is what is written up. In some cases, what is written up exceeds what the athlete actually did. In some cases, what is written up doesn't meet the actions of what the kid actually did. Video everything so that we can review it and make sure the appropriate suspension is handled down. Remember, sportsmanship's a choice. Your student athletes make it, your assistant coach make it, and you make it every day. Make it a priority to go through this. Make it a part of what you do daily. Okay, medical information. Reminder, the approved healthcare providers who can return a student athlete to play anytime it involves a concussion, those 5, they all must be licensed in South Carolina, an MD, a DO, an AT, a PA, and an MP. Any one of those 5 can return a student athlete to play during a contest when symptoms or signs of a concussion are thought to be there. In absence of one of those 5, student athlete sent off the field for a concussion-like symptom by an official, that student athlete will remain out for the remainder of the game. Other important medical information for you, just as a reminder, last year we went through and implemented the wet bulb globe thermometer. Please be mindful of that as we get started in the 2019 school year. This does not just apply to outdoor early year activities. This also could be an indoor activity for the early part of the season, of the school year, and also could be involved in the latter part of the school year when the temperatures begin to rise again. All athletes' physicals must be on file with your school, and the date for that physical to be valid is April 1st of 2019. Any physical dated prior to April 1 of 2019 will not be valid this year for your student athletes. Check with your AD to make sure you have an emergency action plan for your facility, and not only for your facility but for each sports season. In many cases, you may use the same stadium that another sport uses, but you may not have every access point open to get into that stadium for your sport that another sport would. So just check with your AD to make sure you have an emergency action plan. Make sure you're aware of it, and it's always a good idea to keep a copy with you in the event something were to happen and you're the only person there to be able to make a decision on how to get the emergency vehicles in. All right, tournaments. We've had an issue in the last couple of years with tournaments and a definition of what a tournament is. Just a couple of things to remind you of. All tournaments, invitationals, and jamborees, they must be sanctioned by our office. Once we get it sanctioned and approved for sanctioning, we post that on our website. If you're participating in a tournament, an invitational, or a jamboree, check our website to make sure that it's been approved as a sanctioned tournament. If you participate in a non-sanctioned event or host a non-sanctioned event, you are subject to penalties and or fines. Don't put yourself in position to get a penalty and or fine by participating in a non-sanctioned event. Any contest in the preseason must be in a tournament that is sanctioned. We've had to call a few schools this past school year and remind them that you cannot host a round-robin invitational in the preseason. If you're going to host an event during that preseason date period, it must be a tournament. That means it must be a series of contests in competition for a championship at which at least first and second place are decided by a final contest. So if you're going to host an event in the preseason, it must be a tournament, it must be sanctioned. And when you submit your application for sanctioning, you must submit your brackets as they are to be played so that we can approve that as an approved tournament. If you have any questions on that, please feel free to call our office and we'll be glad to help guide you through the process to make sure you get it right. Okay, transfers are ineligible players. The responsibility of making sure that every athlete on your court or field is eligible falls on your principal and athletic director. But it's always a good idea for you to remember what a transfer is and what an ineligible player is so that you can get the information to your AD and not place someone in error. A good thing to do is the first day of tryouts or the first day of practice is to check with every person trying out for your team and just ask one simple question. Who was not at our school from the first day till the last day last year, and who was not at our feeder middle school from the first day until the last day of the previous year? Anyone who was not at your school day one through the final school day of the year before, or at your feeder middle day one through the last school day the year before, is considered a transfer. What that means, if they came in day two, enrolled in your school, and stayed till the end of the year, they are still by rule a transfer. If they came in the last week of school, they are a transfer. Do not ask them who was at our school last year. That could potentially put you in a position to play someone who is ineligible due to the transfer rule. Make sure you take time to ask that question. Pass that along to your AD as soon as possible. If you know you have an athlete who's participating in preseason workouts months ahead of your season, who was not at your school the entire year last year, or not at your feeder middle school the entire school year before, make your AD aware so that they can start the process of a transfer. And in the event they're ineligible due to the transfer rule, they still have time to look into any options that may exist for eligibility. If you wait till the last minute, you could put that athlete in potential of having to sit out an extended period of time waiting on eligibility. And remember, to be eligible, that transfer must meet one of the criteria for eligible transfers stated in our handbook. Just because someone's a transfer does not make them ineligible. If they meet one of the criteria that makes them an eligible transfer, then they will be eligible. That is up to your AD and principal to determine whether that eligibility exists. And reminders, if they're not eligible for any reason, they cannot participate in a scrimmage, jamboree, or contest. They can practice, but they cannot participate in a scrimmage, jamboree, or contest. Okay, the 75% rule. With the change of the sports season, opportunity to practice outside of your sports season with your school team, we've seen an increase in questions from coaches and schools as it pertains to the 75% rule. We've also seen some violations where coaches didn't truly understand the 75% rule. They had a thought of what they perceived it to be. We'll take a moment to go through the basics of the 75% rule. Reminder, the 75% rule only applies to when a coach from your school is associated with the outside team. This includes all school employees and volunteer coaches. So if they work at your school or they coach at your school, paid or unpaid, assistant or head, if they're coaching an outside team that has your players on it, your student athletes, the 75% rule will apply to that outside team. If you or one of your coaches or one of your employees coaches an outside team with players made up of other schools, or from other states, 75% rule doesn't apply to you. 75% rule applies to outside teams with returning players who dressed for a varsity contest the previous season. If you're coaching an outside team that has players from your school on it, but not one of those players dressed for a varsity contest the previous year, then the 75% rule does not apply to you. It only applies when you're coaching an outside team, or when a coach from your school or an employee from your school is coaching an outside team that contains returning players who dressed for a varsity contest the previous season. The numbers that you're allowed to have on that team are listed in the rules and regulations. It's not 75% of your outside team roster. The numbers you're allowed to have of players who dressed for a varsity contest the previous season on your outside team is in the rules and regulations. So we'll continue with the 75% rule. Here are some examples. Example 1. Soccer is allowed 8 players on an outside team under the 75% rule. So if you go to the rules and regulations and you look at the number of players allowed per sport on an outside team, coached by a coach from your school, a volunteer coach from your school, an assistant coach from your school, or a school employee, in the sport of soccer, that outside team is allowed to have 8 players on that team who dressed for a varsity game during the previous season. So if you're coaching a soccer team as an outside team, and you have 7 returning players on that team who dressed for a varsity game at your school, and 11 players who are on the JV season and never dressed for a varsity game, that outside team will meet the 75% rule because you did not exceed 8 players on that outside team that dressed for your varsity team the previous year. Example 2. Basketball is allowed 3 players on an outside team under the 75% rule. The outside team coached by a coach from your school or an employee from your school has 4 players on it who dressed for a varsity game the previous year, and 7 players who never dressed for a varsity game. This would be a violation. The reason that's a violation is that basketball has only allowed 3 players on the outside team that dressed for a varsity contest the previous year. The outside team in this example had 4 players who dressed for the varsity game the previous year and were on the outside team. Therefore, it would be a violation. As always, if you have any questions as to the legality of your varsity team or your outside team, call our office prior to establishing your outside team. Okay, our final slide before we'll turn it over to your sport commissioner for the rule changes in the FHS rule book is on open and closed season. A lot of questions on this past year, and seeing a lot of coaches who don't fully understand what they can and cannot do during this time. Remember, if it's an open season, during that open season, you have 20 days of practice. That 20 days is for your use, however you want to use it, however many hours you want to go, however many kids you want to have out there. The only requirement is you must make it open to all students, and it cannot be mandatory for any. If you want to have 200 kids come to your softball practice, great. You only have 20 days with it. During the open season, your school facilities can be used. I have a lot of coaches who aren't sure they can actually use their school facilities during the open season. The open season, 20 days of practice. You to use how you want. School facilities may be used. Open to all students and cannot be mandatory. And a reminder that football and lacrosse, you have pad exemptions during that 20 days, that you can actually use pads and days where you cannot use pads. Make sure you pay attention to your sport-specific rule if you're in football or lacrosse as it pertains to pads. The closed season. During the closed period, a coach cannot work with any athletes. It's on campus or off campus. The only exception to this would be if you're coaching an outside team that has no affiliation with your school. Students are not allowed to use school facilities on their own. Example of this, no open gyms. You can't unlock the gym and say, hey, I can't be in there, but you can go shoot. That's a violation of the closed season. Strength and conditioning activities are allowed. We get a lot of calls. Hey, can we lift weights? Can we run? Can we condition? Absolutely. You can lift weights and run and condition year-round. You just cannot teach sport-specific skills or training during a closed period. Reminder, June and July, they're open for practice. The only exception to that is the dead week around July 4th. And also in June and July, you have 10 dates for team competition in all sports. That wraps up the first part of your rules presentation. I want to wish you all best of luck this year. And as always, if you have any questions on anything we've covered here or any questions on anything that was not covered here, do not hesitate to call our office or have your athletic director call our office. Our number is 803-798-0120. Thank you.
Welcome to the 2019-20 Online Rules Clinic for Volleyball. I am Amy Boozer, Assistant Commissioner for the South Carolina High School League over Volleyball. My contact information is listed for you, and please feel free to contact me at any time when you have a question regarding volleyball this season. The official rules published by the National Federation will be used along with the following adoption. A 3 out of 5 match may be played when only 2 schools are involved in the match. In the event that you are participating in a match and it is suspended due to power failure or other unforeseen circumstances, it will be resumed from the point of suspension. The score and lineup will be the same when it is resumed as it was at the moment of the suspension. Varsity teams are allowed 18 playdates, 4 scrimmages, and 1 jamboree. Junior varsity teams have 16 playdates, 2 scrimmages, and 1 jamboree. Reminder, tournaments count as 1 playdate, and regardless if the tournament is played over multiple days, it will still only count as 1 playdate. You can play in only 1 preseason tournament, and August 16th is the first date for a preseason tournament. Here are some important dates for the 2019 season. Please make note of these dates, and you can locate these dates listed on the volleyball page of our website or in the rules section for volleyball. Preseason practice plans provide guidance for the first 14 days of practice. Days 1 through 5, 3 hours of practice are permitted. Days 6 through 14 must be alternated between a long and short practice day. Long day, you are permitted 5 hours of practice. Divide the time to best benefit your program. Practices must be separated by 2 hours of continuous rest. A long day can follow a rest day, even if the day before the rest day was a long day. Short day, 3 hours of practice is permitted. Your first day of practice is August 2nd. Practice times, including warm-up, stretching, cool-down time, conditioning, shall not exceed 3 hours. All practices occurring days 1 through 14 must be documented to show compliance. All athletes must complete days 1 through 5 of the practice timeline below before being allowed to participate in more than 3 hours of practice in a day. Players can participate in a JV and varsity match on the same day. However, it will count as 2 play dates. Please make sure that you monitor these play dates and that JV players nor varsity players exceed the match limit. Varsity matches are to be best 3 out of 5 sets unless playing a tri-match. In a tri-match, teams will play best 2 out of 3 sets, and if needed, the third set is to be played to 25 points. JV matches can be modified to play best 2 out of 3 sets, and if needed, the third set is to be played to 15 points. Once captains and coaches are called for the pre-match conference, all teams are required to be in their regular jersey, starting with the call of this meeting. We will again use the individual court time for teams to have warm-ups. Each team will have 6 minutes. During this time, you can hit, serve, and do defensive drills utilizing both sides of the court. The home team will have the first 6 minutes, and the visiting team will have the second 6 minutes. Teams can shag balls for the opponent, but cannot shag in the playable area of the court. Each team shall be responsible for providing and training at least 1 line judge. It is very important that you spend time training your line judges, as they are considered officials during the match. It is strongly recommended that adults be used. If players are used, they may not be dressed in their team uniform. Both schools will provide a line judge. If the visiting team does not have a line judge, they forfeit this right, and the home school will provide a second line judge. On October 21st, regions should submit volleyball qualifiers for the playoffs. Playoffs will begin on October 23rd with our Class A, 2A, and 3A schools, and October 24th for Classes 4A and 5A. November 6th, we will hold a press conference for teams that have advanced to the state championship game, and this year, November 9th, the state championship game will be held at River Bluff High School. The following slides will cover the National Federation, rule changes, major editorial changes, and points of emphasis for this season. Sports Import is the official volleyball partner of the NFHS. Please look them up when you are looking at purchasing new equipment, such as volleyball standards and nets for your gym. The NFHS writes playing rules for 17 sports, with volleyball being one of the 17. Your AD can order you a rules book as well as a scorebook and roster lineup sheets. If you are in need of a rules book, scorebook, or roster lineup sheets, please contact your AD so they can submit that request to our office. The NFHS also offers rules and case books available as an ebook. These can be purchased for $6.99 each. Rule apps for all NFHS rules books and case books are available on iTunes and Google Play. The app is free to download, and book subscriptions are $6.99. If you have a player who may need special accommodations for this upcoming season, please make sure that you submit a request to the South Carolina High School League so that accommodation can be reviewed, and then if approved, it will be returned to you with a letter that you can share with officials during this season. The first rule change deals with retractable ceiling poles cables. When the volleyball strikes, the cables and/or the diagonal poles used to retract ceiling suspended net systems, the referee will stop play and determine if the ball was playable. The referee will signal out of bounds if the ball, in the judgment of the official, is not playable, or replay if the ball is determined playable. This establishes that the cables and diagonal poles used to retract ceiling suspended net systems as restricted play, allowing the referee to determine if the ball would have been playable if the cables and/or poles had not been there. Starting this season, there has been a change. Rule 421 has been reorganized and simplified to address a legal uniform. The libero uniform top must clearly contrast with the uniform top worn by the rest of his or her teammates and conform to all other uniform rules. All currently compliant libero uniforms will maintain compliance under the new rule. Rationale for this, it clarifies the requirements for all legal uniforms and simplifies the requirements for the contrasting libero uniform while maintaining the compliance of all currently compliant team and libero uniform jerseys. The new Rule 422 requires the libero uniform top to clearly contrast from the predominant colors of the uniform top of the team. The libero uniform top shall not use the same predominant colors of the team uniform top and merely reverse the location of the colors. This does not create a clearly contrasting uniform. The first step in evaluating libero team uniform compliance is to establish the predominant colors of the team uniform top. The libero uniform top can contain the predominant colors of the team uniform as an accent color, but it shall not be the predominant color of the libero uniform top. When one predominant color can be established in any of the accent colors, if clearly contrasting, can be used as the predominant color of the libero uniform top. In this picture, the team uniform has one predominant color. That color is black. This slide shows a picture of a compliant team jersey and contrasting libero jersey. Since the accent colors, white and orange, are contrasting colors to black, either color could be used as the predominant color of the libero uniform top. Since the accent color gray is not a contrasting color to black, it cannot be used to the predominant color of the libero uniform top. The predominant color of the team uniform top, black, can be used as an accent color on the libero uniform. Uniform tops can have multiple predominant colors sharing approximately the same amount of space on the uniform top. The libero uniform tops shall be clearly contrasting from the team uniform top. Simply reversing the placement of the predominant colors does not create contrasting uniform tops. In this picture, the team uniform contains four colors: light blue, navy, white, and gray. White and gray are clearly accent colors. Light blue and navy blue make up approximately an equal amount of the majority of the uniform top, establishing light blue and navy blue as the predominant colors of the uniform top. Here is a comparison of jerseys with predominant colors being used over half of the uniform. The uniform on the left of the jersey is a compliant libero uniform top. The use of white as the predominant color creates a compliant uniform combination. It is not the predominant color of the team jersey and it clearly contrasts. The use of both light blue and navy blue as an accent color is compliant. The uniform on the right of the team jersey is a non-compliant uniform top. It has taken the two predominant colors and merely switched locations on the libero jersey. This does not create a contrasting libero uniform top. This rule change refers to logos being placed on the jersey. The school's name, nickname, logo, mascot, and our team member's name are permitted on the uniform top and or bottom. A sublimated team mascot is compliant on both the team and libero jersey. School references are allowed on all uniform tops but shall not obstruct the visibility of the uniform number. Please note this is a correction to the 2019-20 hard copy of the National Federation Volleyball Rules Book. Rule 421E, the school's name, nickname, logo, mascot, and our team members' names are permitted on the uniform top and or bottom. The sentence that says a single mascot reference and or school name may be placed on the sleeve, not to exceed either 4 inches by 4 inches or 3 inches by 5 inches, has been removed with the elimination of the solid colored jersey requirements. There are no size restrictions to school references placed on the sleeve of the team or the libero uniform top. The use of 00 as a uniform number has been eliminated. Only number 0 is allowed. This helps eliminate confusion surrounding the signaling of 00 and 0 by the officials. Beginning with the 2023 season, the body of the uniform number must clearly contrast from the body of the uniform regardless of trim. This will eliminate the allowance of trim to provide the only contrast between the body of the number and the uniform top. Trim will still be allowed, a contrasting border not to exceed a ½ inch in width and at its widest point. All currently compliant uniform numbers will be compliant through the 22-23 school year. This allows officials and scorers to easily identify uniform numbers. Rule changes for roster and lineups. The second referee shall collect team rosters at the pre-match conference. Coaches can make changes to the roster until 10 minutes remain on the pregame clock. All rosters and lineups must be submitted to the second referee, not the scorer. This eliminates warm-up interruptions by officials requesting rosters with 10 minutes remaining on the warm-up clock, allowing for a smoother warm-up process and set transition for coaches, players, officials, and scorers. Rule 5-9-2A, this is a note. The line judge shall take his or her position and move in line with the extension of the end line when the ball is being served near the line judge's base position. The line judge shall watch for the foot fault on the end line and move quickly back to base position for a view of the sideline. This allows the line judge to watch for foot faults with the end line and move quickly back to the base position for a view of the sideline. This is a more appropriate position and transition for line judges. Rule change for illegal serve. The ball remains dead when tossed for serve and it touches any part of the backboard or supports hanging in a vertical position over the serving area and is illegal serve and not a service fault. Signal out of bounds. The result of this action has not changed. It has been more appropriately placed under 8-2-5 illegal serve and removed from 8-2-6 service faults. This accurately reflects the action since the ball is not contacted for the serve. Rule 4-2-7 has had an editorial change. The penalty for the removal of any part of the uniform top or bottom is a yellow card charged to the coach for unsporting conduct. Points of emphasis for the 2019-20 year deal with signals for the officials. Communication is an essential proactive approach used by officials to elevate questions about decisions and non-decisions on the court. This communication takes place between the two officials and between officials and coaches. There are times during play when it is necessary for the referees to communicate between each other to eliminate a confusion between officials. An additional focus of the 2019-20 Volleyball Rules Committee is on the use of informal signals to communicate during play between officials and coaches. 2 new informal signals have been added to the NFHS Volleyball Officials Manuals as tools for officials to use when providing information regarding the reason for continuous play during a potential illegal back row attack. The first referee can signal the ball was contacted below the height of the net or the back row player was behind the attack line. The second referee does not use or mirror the signal. These signals should be used discreetly and sparingly. An extended vertical background that is not retracted hanging over a playable area is considered restricted play, and upon contact the referee can signal replay or out of bounds depending on if, in the judgment of the referee, the ball would have or have not remained in play. A vertical backboard raised to the side and toward the ceiling, even though still technically vertical, is considered a playable overhead obstruction. A ball striking the raised backboard, regardless of how it is raised, above a playable area shall remain in play provided the ball does not cross the plane of the net and is playable by a teammate. The NFHS offers a volleyball course on coaching volleyball. This is through USA Volleyball and the American Volleyball Coaches Association. As you can see on this, they provide course objectives, units. This information can be obtained in nfhslearn.com. If you are a new coach and just learning the game of volleyball, this is a great course that you could take and help you as you prepare for this upcoming season. Our state championship matches can be viewed on the NFHS network, as well as many other of our state championship games in other sports during this 2019-20 year. We hope if you cannot attend the event that you will consider viewing on NFHS network. This concludes the 2019-20 rule session for volleyball. All information that was shared today can be accessible on the SCHSL website under volleyball or in the handbook in the rules section for volleyball. Good luck to you this season.